Long ago, before roads were wide and before time was counted by clocks, there was a peaceful land in what is now known as Cameroon. The land was rich with tall green trees, winding rivers that sang softly as they moved, and red earth that held the footprints of many generations. Villages rested gently between forests and farms, and every morning the sound of birds mixed with the voices of people greeting the new day. In this land, life moved slowly and carefully, and people believed that every action, no matter how small, carried a meaning. At the edge of one such village stood a great Iroko tree. Its roots were thick and deep, and its branches stretched wide, offering shade to elders and children alike. It was under this tree that stories were told, decisions were made, and lessons passed from one heart to another. The villagers believed that the tree remembered everything it had ever seen, and that it listened when people spoke with truth. Among the people of this village lived Tambe, a young man of 24 years. Tambe was strong and hardworking, known for his kindness and patience. He helped his mother on their small farm and was respected by many, even though he spoke little. There was also Nola, a young woman of 22 years, gentle in speech and thoughtful in action. She was known for her wisdom beyond her age, and many believed she would one day become a great guide to others. Bako, a man of 26 years, was Tambe's closest friend since childhood. They had grown up sharing food, laughter, and dreams. Bako was clever and ambitious, always thinking about how to gain more respect and comfort in life. The village elder was Elder Muvondo, a man of 70 years whose hair was white like ash and whose voice carried the weight of experience. He believed deeply in balance, honesty, and patience. Finally, there was Mama Sela, Tambe's mother, a quiet woman whose strength showed not in loud words but in endurance and care. Tambe and Bako were known as brothers even though they were not born of the same parents. When Tambe harvested crops, Bako helped him. When Bako needed advice, Tambe listened. People often said, "Where you see Tambe, you will find Bako." One season, the rains were especially generous. Crops grew tall and healthy, and the village prepared for a great harvest celebration. Elder Muvondo announced that the village would choose a young man to help manage the shared grain store, a role of great trust and responsibility. Many believed Tambe would be chosen, for he was honest and steady. Others whispered that Bako, with his sharp mind, might be selected instead. When the day came, Elder Muvondo spoke calmly beneath the Iroko tree. He explained that both Tambe and Bako would share the responsibility together so that trust could be balanced with wisdom. The villagers nodded in approval. At first, the arrangement worked well. Tambe counted carefully. Bako recorded diligently. Together, they protected the village's food. As weeks passed, Bako began to notice how people praised Tambe for his honesty. Though Bako did just as much work, the villagers trusted Tambe's heart more than Bako's sharp words. Slowly, a quiet discomfort grew inside Bako, like a small stone in his shoe. Bako told himself he deserved more recognition. He thought, if I had more wealth, more respect would follow. These thoughts did not come loudly. They arrived softly, night after night. One evening, while alone in the grain store, Bako adjusted the record slightly. The change was small, almost invisible. No one noticed. Nothing happened. This made the thought return again. Over time, Bako began taking a little grain for himself, telling himself it was temporary. He planned to return it later, but as days passed, returning it felt harder than taking it. When Tambe asked gentle questions, Bako smiled and reassured him. Tambe trusted him without doubt. Eventually, the village noticed that supplies seemed lighter than expected. Elder Muvondo called a meeting. He did not accuse anyone. Instead, he reminded everyone that trust was the strongest wall a village could build. That night, guilt weighed heavily on Bako, but fear spoke louder than truth. When suspicion grew, Bako quietly told others that Tambe might be making mistakes. The words were spoken softly, but they spread quickly. Tambe was shocked when people looked at him differently. Mama Sela noticed the change in her son's eyes, though he said nothing. One morning, a child accidentally knocked over the record basket, revealing these altered numbers. Elder Muvondo examined them carefully. The truth unfolded slowly, like fog lifting from a field. Bako was called before the village. He did not shout or run. He simply stood there, his shoulders heavy. Tambe looked at him with pain, not anger. Elder Muvondo spoke gently. He explained that the harm was not in the grain taken, but in the trust broken. After the truth was revealed, the village grew quiet. No one shouted, no one pointed fingers. The silence itself carried the weight of what had happened. Bako stood with his head lowered, and for the first time, he truly felt the distance he had created between himself and the people who once trusted him. Elder Muvondo did not speak immediately. He allowed the silence to teach its own lesson. Then, he asked Bako to speak, not to defend himself, but to explain his choices. Bako's voice was low and unsteady as he spoke about his desire to be seen, his fear of being overlooked, and the small decisions that slowly led him away from honesty. Each word seemed to lift something heavy from his chest, even as shame filled his eyes. Tambe listened without interrupting. Inside him, there was pain, but also confusion. He remembered the many days they had walked side by side, shared meals, and laughed like brothers. He did not understand how such closeness could lead to such harm. Elder Muvondo reminded the village that mistakes alone do not define a person, but how one responds to those mistakes reveals their true character. Bako was asked to step away from his role and spend time reflecting, helping the village in quiet service rather than leadership. This was not meant as punishment, but as a path towards understanding. Days turned into weeks. Tambe returned to his work, but something inside him had changed. He moved more slowly, spoke even less, and often sat beneath the Iroko tree, alone. Mama Sela noticed this and sat beside him one evening, placing her hand gently on his. She reminded him that trust, once given freely, is never wasted, even when it is broken. It shows the goodness of the giver, not the failure of the receiver. Her words did not erase his pain, but they softened it. Meanwhile, Bako walked quietly on the edges of the village, repairing fences, clearing paths, and helping elders without being asked. He spoke little, but each task was done with care. Some villagers watched him with caution, others with hope. Trust, they knew, does not return quickly. One season, the rains failed, crops struggled, and the village faced uncertainty. Elder Muvondo gathered everyone once more beneath the Iroko tree. He spoke of unity, patience, and shared responsibility. He reminded them that difficult times reveal the strength of a community. During this period, Bako noticed that Tambe and his mother were struggling. Without drawing attention, he left small bundles of food at their doors at night. He did not seek thanks or forgiveness, he simply acted. Tambe eventually realized who was helping. He did not confront Bako. Instead, he began to observe him closely, watching his actions rather than listening to words. When the rains finally returned and the village prepared once more to organize its resources, Elder Muvondo surprised everyone. He announced that a new system would be created, one where responsibility was shared by many and where transparency guided every decision. He also invited Bako to speak, not as a leader, but as someone who had learned deeply from failure. Bako spoke honestly about how envy had blinded him and how service had taught him humility. Tambe was then asked to respond. After a long pause, he spoke calmly. He said that while the memory of betrayal remained, he had seen effort, change, and sincerity. He did not declare full trust restored, but he acknowledged growth. The village understood. Healing, like trust, moves step by step. As time passed, life in the village slowly returned to balance. The fields grew green again. Laughter returned to gatherings, and children once more played freely near the river. The story of Tambe and Bako became one that elders told, not with anger, but with care. They explained that betrayal often wears the face of familiarity, and that envy grows when gratitude is forgotten. They also taught that forgiveness does not mean forgetting, but choosing wisdom over bitterness. Bako never again sought attention or praise. He found peace in steady effort and honest living. Tambe, though changed, became even more respected, not only for his integrity, but for his ability to remain fair even when hurt. Elder Mvondo reminded everyone that every community is shaped not by perfection, but by how it responds to imperfection. As the years passed, the village continued to grow and change, just as all living places do. New children were born, elders aged quietly, and seasons came and went with their own lessons. Yet, the story of Tambe and Bako never faded. It became one of those stories that did not belong to the past alone, but lived in the present, shaping how people treated one another every day. When children asked why elders spoke so carefully about trust, they were told this story. When young people felt envy rise in their hearts, they were reminded of Bako's early choices and the long road he walked to find peace again. When someone felt hurt by another's actions, they were encouraged to remember Tambe's patience and steady strength. Under the great Iroko tree, Elder Mvondo's voice was sometimes remembered even after he was no longer there to speak. People recalled how he used silence as a teacher and how he believed that understanding grows best when it is allowed time. One evening, many years later, Tambe sat beneath the same Iroko tree, now older, with lines of experience gently shaping his face. Beside him sat young children, listening closely as he told them stories of the village, the land, and the choices people make. Bako passed by quietly, carrying tools to help repair a neighbor's roof. He nodded respectfully, and Tambe nodded back. There was no need for long conversation. Their understanding had grown beyond words. The children noticed this and asked why the two men treated each other with such calm respect. Tambe smiled and said that life teaches us many lessons, but the deepest ones come from listening, reflecting, and choosing better paths. As the sun set and the sky turned soft shades of orange and blue, the village settled into rest. Fires were lit, meals were shared, and the air carried the quiet peace of a community that had learned from its past. The story did not end with perfect happiness, nor did it end with lasting sorrow. Instead, It ended with wisdom, which is the true gift of all good stories. This folktale reminds us that every choice, no matter small, shapes our future. Trust is built slowly and broken easily. True respect comes from honesty and consistency. Growth is possible when we accept responsibility. A strong community values learning over punishment. Stories like this are meant to leave listeners calm, thoughtful, and ready to apply the lesson in their own lives. Stories are not told to entertain alone, but to guide the heart and steady the mind. And so, as the night grows quiet and the land rests, this story remains, waiting to be told again whenever someone needs to remember the value of trust, the power of choice, and the wisdom that comes from learning together. Thank you for spending your time with us today. To make sure you never miss one of our beautiful stories, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We can't wait to share the next one with you.